All right, today I've got Kelli McCardell of McCardell Restoration in one of my favorite cities, Lansing, Michigan. Yes, I'm partial. I used to live there. His business has been around for a long time, but 2023, whew, that was a doozy, right? Then came 2024 and everything really turned around for you. Revenue up, profit up, systems finally clicking. Really just wanted to sit down with you today and have a conversation about, hey, what worked, man? Because I see, I get the opportunity to talk to a lot of restoration professionals, and the bad years come and go, man. And really, what's more important is like, how do you dig out? How do you get yourself out of the trench, right? Um, so in 2024, you grew both revenue and profit. Like, what changed, man?
So, looking back, I've been grinding pretty hard since '02. And in 2020, I got married. Before that, we had tried to bring in different consultants or general managers, operations managers, people to help take a little bit off the responsibility that I had. And so in 2020, got married, wanted to spend a lot of time with my wife, and figured out that we needed to add some people. We needed to bring some people to our team. So we figured that EOS was a great tool to get started with. We tried that, went on for about a year, and wasn't really taking us where we needed to go with the same team we had. And I ended up stumbling upon Ben Justinson and Pivot. He recommended Pivot. So 2022, we started Pivot, and we reviewed our entire service process from that point out. Changed some things, and I'll tell you, it was really hard at first. 2023 was a tough year. There was a lot of ups and downs. We changed a lot of people out between 21 and 22, and we ended up with a new service process and some new people, and we started reviewing some metrics. And before you know it, things made sense. We saw what we needed to change or what we needed to focus on, rather than trying to do everything at once. And also, the burden wasn't all on one person anymore, or just what felt like one person. It was a shared responsibility with responsibility or accountability for each individual that's on that management team.
And we see a lot of folks walking that same path where, they're trying to do less with the business, and not necessarily because of a lack of desire, but because of competing priorities. Either the business needs more from them, or, like in your case, you're like, hey, I just got married. And this lady's awesome. I met her. Stacy's incredible. Like, yeah, who wouldn't want to spend more time with somebody you love, right? When did you feel the shift start to occur? What was that one moment? It could be a key hire, a process change where you were like, okay, I feel like we've crested the mountain and I'm finally on the backside. I'm on the downslope of all this pain.
So yeah, got worse at first, making changes, and I think that it was once we had made some changes in the team and really understood. I'd say reading the book The Advantage was really helpful to me, outside of all of the coaching that Pivot offers, to improve the culture in your business. So I'm a systems guy, but maybe to implement those systems, you have to get a group of people to do so, versus someone, not the same person that's creating them and writing them, can implement them typically. So we got a team involved to do that. And when we started to really break down the responsibilities of the baton, the race of getting the job from start to finish, and you get the call to the final billing, and we started breaking down who's responsible in each one of those individual categories, and holding them accountable with some of the metrics that we were looking at is based on the timeline and the turnaround. That's when things really started to change, and we started hiring the right people with the right attitudes. Not that we didn't have some good people, but they got burned out doing everything themselves.
Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about the previous model, right? Because you were traditionally write and run, correct?
Yeah, we wrote and run our jobs for all the way through to 2022, for almost 20 plus years. And we still, even to this day, sometimes operate like that. However, we are in the process of what I thought was going to be simple. There was the having a PM go and scope the job, bring back the scope, and hand it off to an estimator, centralized, to create a centralized estimating system, and get the approval, and then hand that back to production. that unicorn getting burned out up front, that PM who used to do it all, really was something that I thought would be a lot easier to overcome. And that was a very difficult transition for us to involve the teamwork that it needed to make that happen. Starting with the field data capture you have to do, including the approval, the actual approval, submitting it and getting it approved by the insurance. I think that was probably the hardest hurdle to overcome in our transition of breaking down that process and trying to have a team perform that job versus just one individual from start to finish.
And so what was the one thing that, like the way that process innovation works is you're constantly testing and breaking, testing and breaking, and testing and breaking. And then you test and you're like, oh crap, that's the one, that's the way. What was, walk me through like that moment in history and tell me, what was the one thing where you were like, okay, we're going to try it this way. And then you felt that sense of relief and you were like, oh gosh, that actually worked. We're going to be okay.
You mentioned the one thing. I think it was like, oh, this would be it. The scoping process needs to be developed. We've got to figure out what field data capture tool to use. Is it in Circle or is it Matterport? Can we do this with just 360 video or pictures? And what it ended up being was the estimator needed to be provided with the proper scope and of a full picture of what we were doing on the job versus figuring it out as we go. And so that was super helpful to have that tool in place. And we tried them all, but it was super helpful to have a standard process that everybody gathers that, does the field data capture the same way so that it can be handed over to an estimator to estimate. Otherwise, you're not going to get the product that you need for your client.
So if somebody's starting at that same inflection point where they're like, okay, I've heard enough people in the ecosystem talk about centralized estimating. I think it's a good move for my organization. And they're looking to build that field data capture function within their business. What would you tell them to do or not do?
I would explain that they need to write down the process step by step from the point that they get the call through to the point that they hand it off to the estimator, ensuring that they are capturing the proper data for that estimator to estimate. And then the second portion of that would be to have a standard template of what you want that estimate to look like based on the work you're going to be performing, broken down by water, fire, mold, your main categories of work, including RICO, trauma, and then you could break those down into individualized types of damage, like a kitchen damage. So really having an expert estimator, somebody who, maybe you need to reach out to a third party at first and have them help you to make sure that it's not the person not the process. Instead, you're really focusing on, you have the right process, but the person who's doing it is the right person for the estimating. We had a couple of estimators we brought in that were not from our industry and tried to train them from scratch. And it was a challenge to do so. They didn't know what they needed. And I think it would have been helpful to probably have a more tenured estimator do it. However, I didn't want to take the same estimators we had in-house to develop that process because they were used to writing and running. They'd go out, they'd look at the job, they'd take their pictures, they'd come back. They want to do it the same way. And historically, I find that project managers don't want to change the way they operate. Nobody likes
what? No way.
I know, it's a surprise.
I'm always like within a restoration organization, I could walk through a facility and I could call out who are the project managers. And I could probably even tell you who's the reconstruction project manager without even having any dialogue, just on facial expression alone. Because they always look miserable until you start talking war stories, and then all of a sudden they come alive and they just want to talk about how bad it actually gets.
It can be good, go out, sell the job, sign the job, let the customer know what's going to be done, bring the information back, and then let someone else sit at the desk for 4 hours and write an estimate.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you termed them unicorns, because I've used that quite a bit, where I'm like, okay, so you expect them to have great people skills. You expect them to, also be willing to sit down and stare at computer screens for 4 hours, but then immediately get into a truck and respond to a loss. And you expect them to do all of that at 100% every day, all day. Like, that's a unicorn. Like, not saying that those individuals don't exist. They definitely do exist, but far and few between. Like, give me a solid PM that may be lacking technical skills, but has the interpersonal relationship building baked into them. And then give me an estimator who can't let go of things, like viscerally cannot let go of things until they're satisfied and they know it's 100% estimate, and lock that dude in a closet, give him a nice set of noise canceling headphones, and just let him rage on sheets all day, every day. I love that dynamic.
Agreed. And I never really understood how special some of these unicorns were, until other people in the industry started breaking down this process. And I know we tried years ago, and we did it by having a project manager go out, get the information, bring it back to the estimator. Or no, I'm sorry. We had them go out and had an estimator go out, write the estimate, bring it back. And then the PM would have to try to perform the work. And it never worked. It was never the same. It was never the right scope. So we had the wrong process, not necessarily people. And I didn't know that. That was 10 years ago. But now I look back and I think to myself, wow, project manager goes out, like you said, we need to remind ourselves that they're busy. And so they're flying all the way through. They feel like once they get the estimates done, their part of the job is probably finished, but it's really just starting. Now they've got to get the approval. That adjuster now calls them and says, let's go through this estimate right now. Unscheduled, they're in their car, they're not writing things down. It just gets to be too much. It's way too complicated. They're frustrated. Probably the adjuster's frustrated. And I think that it's the best when you've got someone who's ready for that all day, every day, to handle those phone calls and can schedule a time to review that estimate rather than going through it right there at that moment. It's just unbelievable what some of the people in our industry have done.
Yeah. I always used to love, the project manager, run project manager that never wrote anything down. And I'd be like, okay, tell me about the job. Okay. Well, what's the thickness of the drywall, right? Is it 1/2 or 5/8? And I'll be like, cool. Where's that in your documentation? And I like this one guy I worked with, he would just be like, here's my dash, bro. Here's my CRM right here. And I'm like, that works if it's just you, man. But, like when you go to hand this off to collections, okay, yeah, like every little bit helps. Every little bit helps.
I think pretending like you don't have Xactimate to break down and provide you with all the calculations you need is a good way to start. And write down, really, there's 4 things you need. One is, what are you removing? What are you adding back? And the square footage to go along with it. And what material do you need? And then 4 is any special instructions that come along with that. Like, can you get the drywall up the stairs or not?
I always felt like, hey, how do we access the job? Like particularly in the downtown environments, like Honolulu was a pain in the butt for us. I'm like, because you could expend 30 to 50% of your labor in logistics alone in some of these condominium buildings. And when you put that through the lens of what Xactimate is and the tool that it should serve as, like, it don't work. Like a drywall minimum on the 32nd floor of a building in Honolulu is not $600. Like, it's $2,000 because they got to go back 4 times. That's 4 times they're circling the block trying to find parking. And then they have to find, the right freight elevator. And, you have to check in with security. And then by the time it's like an hour and a half by the time you get into the building. Times 4, because none of these people like to play ball with you unless you treat them nice. So we talked a lot about people and process, right? When you have a problem and you're trying to solve for it, is this a people problem or is this a process problem? How do you sort through it?
Well, sometimes you just got to push through, but really, you sit down, you discuss in advance, break down the what ifs, and then go try it. And if it doesn't work, you come back and you figure out whether it's the attitude of the people that are going out and trying it, like, this just won't work, or, don't give something to somebody that says it won't work, to try something new, and if they do come back and say it doesn't work, walk back through the process as many times as it takes to try to get it right. Take input from everybody. And I think a good meeting structure in advance, knowing where the areas to look out at would be for the group to have a meeting before that point or immediately after, so nobody's frustrated. Ultimately, people want to help each other, and they really want to make things better. So if you get the right team together with the right attitude, I think anything can be resolved. And seeking to understand that problem as soon as it happens or immediately after would be a good start.
You mentioned meeting structure. I know you've got a pretty robust meeting structure at McCardell. What's your favorite meeting and why?
Our leadership meeting. I'm able to go in there and talk about all the items that are on my mind all week. And it's a time where I'm able to do that rather than just calling somebody out of the blue and surprising them throughout their day. They're expecting me to come in and talk about the issues that are at hand.
If we just said meeting structure and somebody who's listening is going, what the hell are you guys talking about? What would you tell them? How would you answer that question?
I'd say a meeting structure is a way for individuals to communicate at a predetermined time. So they all expect that the issues are coming, use the same structure, and design it so that it fits your needs. Not every company is the same. Some companies like to have a huddle in the morning, and some people like to have a huddle in the afternoon. Some people like to meet, every day and have a one-on-one with their leadership team. And some people want to do it once a week. So I think that ultimately find out what works for yourself, stay consistent, and make sure that you've got a team there that contributes and is engaged. And if they're not, figure out how to do it, because you're going to get the real pulse of the team and what's going on in your business. When you're reporting the numbers and the metrics that are there, you can then discuss those items that aren't going well. And it's the lifeblood of the company.
How do you know when you've had a good meeting, or how do you know the meeting didn't waste anybody's time?
When we list issues out and we get through the issues with resolution and to-dos, I think that the next meeting will tell you whether or not your previous meeting was good. However, if people feel that they've got what they need to do within that meeting by the end of it, and they walk out of there knowing the goal, then that's a good meeting. If there's no resolution, or you talk about topics that are not at hand or immediately needed, that's, I think, when people lose. They lose their interest. They're not engaged.
I can't remember who coined the term sacred cows, but it speaks to this context of within a meeting and within a group of people, there always tends to be things that are socially off limits, but they're the most important things to discuss. And I think universally we all know, like, hey, sometimes you just got to talk to the elephant in the room. When you are in your meetings and you run across a sacred cow, what do you do?
Bring it to the top of the issues list and let everybody know it's a safe place to talk, or remind them if they're feeling uncomfortable. However, I mean, it's your team that you work with on a daily basis, and usually they're closer than family. So you address it. You hope to get it out of the way, whether it's a person or it's a process that you need to discuss. It's a good time to do it with the team that's going to be resolving it. Nobody's coming to save us. So if we break out that sacred cow and we discuss it, the issue that seems to be off limits elsewhere, it's nice to bring it to the top, seek to understand what's going on, and come up with some resolution, or at least start the conversation for next time.
I have a folder on my OneDrive that I just keep, like, most commonly referenced visual graphics or visual aids. And what's in there is the Lencioni pyramid from the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And in that structure, if nobody's seen it, just Google it. You can find it readily available on the internet. But it talks, like, he structures this 5-layer pyramid, and basically the theory is that in order to ascend the layers of the pyramid and get to the peak, you got to have these foundational pieces in place. And the first one is trust. The second one is conflict. So the theory being, if you don't have trust, you cannot have conflict, right? And, you know, creating that trust within a team speaks a lot to culture and morale. And a lot of the times we find that, you know, our clients and even myself as a leader would struggle with the dichotomy of, hey, look, I know I have to make sure that we make this an awesome place to work, but I also need to hold people accountable to producing results. Those things historically, even in my brain, have worked against each other. So how did you navigate maintaining company culture with increasing accountability in the growth of your business?
You know, as a galvanizer, I like to get people together and get them on the same page. And my personality type as a campaigner is, it's sometimes hard to bring up those issues, I guess, if you don't have the right people in the room. You know, people want to take that conversation, and rather than attacking the problem, maybe attack people, and that can be a real issue. And I think that that's helped me to focus on the problem, you know, versus the people. You know, sometimes it is the people, and we have to admit that. The metrics that we have that we've set up in these meetings, we review the scorecard every time, helps us to point those items out, get them on a list, and address them. We might all know what's going on. Like you said, the sacred cow needs to be brought up and brought up somehow. Ultimately, it's use our metrics to point out what the issue is, address it with your team, don't make it personal, and move forward and hope for progress next week. A couple weeks go by and you don't see anything. Maybe you escalate the situation and, you know, talk about it in one-on-ones outside of that.
Yeah.
Try to maintain the peace between all, because if one person's pointing the finger at another, you got to figure out, you know, do a seek to understand and figure out who's, you know, what's really going on.
Agreed. So if you had to rebuild your business systems from scratch, like it all went away tomorrow, full nuclear reset at McCardell, where would you start? What would you do first?
So I would figure out my core processes for the marketing, and first off, I think would be the most important part for me. I want to know where I'm getting my work from. And once I figure out what the work I want, I would go through and I would determine the service process that we would provide. Pretty basic up front, but if it was restoration, mold, water, fire, and reconstruction, so that the team knows what they need to do and everybody's on the same page. And then I would focus on my accounting and admin process, you know, just at a really top core level, and let the team figure out how they're going to handle some of the details, rather than dialing in on one individual process, maybe the way that I started, and really getting into the nitty gritty up front. I would keep it very basic and top level.
At Pivot, we have WhatsApp channels for all of our peer groups. And I ran some analytics, some year-to-date analytics mid-year. And your group, Pivot Group 5, has had the most, you know, like comments or texts or whatever you want to call them, the most bits of communication over any other peer group in our ecosystem. You guys, like, I always joke when I'm talking to other people, I'm like, here's P5. If I don't see something at least once a day, like, I'm scared. Like, somebody might have died, because you guys are so consistent with your communication. What role has your peer group played in giving you insight or calling you out?
Yeah, it's a tight knit group. And I believe that all of them have been in the restoration or construction business or some type of business previously. They all have some knowledge that's come from somewhere else outside of that, previous to that. And they're not afraid to speak up. They are not shy. And it's a lot of fun to hear some responses, and sometimes not so much, you know. We sometimes we know what we need to do, and we don't do it. So I think that's where the accountability comes in, is looking at metrics on a monthly basis with our peer group. And that's really when we get called out. Or if, you know, people tend to complain, you know, we get on there, we've got a problem, what we do about it. You know, we sometimes lay it out all perfectly, right? We don't just complain, or we get on there and we complain about it, and everyone lets us know their thoughts and their feedback. from more of a clear standpoint. You know, people get excited. They want help. It's lonely at the top. You know, if you're the only one who's the general manager, the operations manager of your business, it can be scary some days. You know, you're high and having a good time. You got a big job, but then 5 days later you're at the low because you know somebody's come in and halted the project, or something didn't go well, or you got 10 more jobs, and now you need, you know, some support. And it's not just physical support for the job, but it's, you know, emotional support from the team and the people that are around, somebody to understand, somebody to help, you know, hear you and feel heard. So I think that's probably the biggest benefit to the group for me is feeling heard and being able to get some feedback from people who are going through the exact same things that I'm going through.
Tell me a story about a time where, you know, the peer group called you out or made you aware of something you weren't aware, and it stung a little bit, but you knew it was the right thing. Because I think this is the thing that most people fear about being a part of a peer group.
Yeah. So we go through our BOA once a year, or no, twice a year, and we list out all the things that we think that people need to change or pay attention to in their business. And for me, there were multiple things that stick in my head. One was our implementation of our centralized estimating. You know, that was one that really stuck out to me. Everybody's like, yeah, your estimate turnaround time sucks. Well, yes, it does. We're working on that. It's exactly what I was trying to do. We already pointed out the problem, but they just kept telling me that. I wanted to hear how we could do it. I wanted somebody who had the same issues that I had go through that process and give me some insight. And I didn't really want to hear it. But you know, Anthony, the first time that we had our BOA was you sat down and you said, Kelli, you should probably have a general manager come into your company, and you know, you're a visionary, and let the general manager implement the process. You've done a great job with a lot of that, but you probably need to do that. And the second thing is send your estimates out, you know, and I didn't want to hear either one of those things. And that was really tough for me to hear, I think. So outside of that, it took, you know, about 1.5 years or 2 years, and we really focused on how we could get some of these general manager responsibilities into somebody else's hands, so I didn't have as much to pay attention to on a day-to-day basis, and, you know, allowed me to focus on other things. And then we did end up finally securing, you know, an outside source for our estimates to be reviewed, and then again internally handled it. So you were right up front, even though I didn't want to hear it for that first year. And I knew it. I didn't want to do it. I wanted to, you know, it's hard. Change is hard, man. Change is hard. So thanks for that.
Sometimes it's like the most awkward position in the world, being a facilitator, right? Like everybody's like, oh, you just have this insight. And I'm like, no, I don't think I do. I have the advantage that it's not my baby. And with that comes a certain level of clarity, but I will agree with you. Like, I don't want to break your heart on any given day, but I also can't walk out of the room and go to sleep at night if I see something that I know we need to discuss and I don't raise the flag. Like, that stuff will keep me up at night. So what's one old school business system you'll never abandon? You're like, you know what? This has been happening for 20 years and it frickin' works. I'm keeping it.
I would have to say WIP meetings, you know, sitting down and going over the jobs with the team that's there, even though it's an expensive meeting. You know, people learn out of that. It gets everybody on the same page. It helps others feel the other's frustration. I really think that at the end of the day, sitting down and going over those projects that we have and figuring out like the next few steps on them have helped the growth of each individual, and not to mention keep the jobs on track. And we've tried to go without it, and we always go back to that. Always.
Yeah. Now you're a systems and process guy. Like, quite often you'll show up to peer group meetings and it's like, there's the Kelli McCardell Bible playbook, always ready and on tap. You just build systems. Like, that is innate to who you are. What's the system you're building right now that you're most excited about?
Well, you know, we revamped our entire service process and had to rework some of the systems and processes that we had developed before. So I'm kind of pulling out of that, but ultimately dialing in on the approval process is probably the biggest one. Once you get the estimate written, the insurance game is constantly changing. One thing works one day with one insurance company or adjuster, and the next day it doesn't. And so we're just trying to figure out how we can stay consistent, generally stay consistent, so that we can kind of stay on the same track and make sure that our approvals are made. We want to get it turned around and turn around fast, and stop messing around with these 2 or 3 month, or even taking it to appraisal. That's probably the most difficult system that I think we're working on right now. There's a number of others though, and that I'm really focusing on. I think onboarding of our clients, we continually work with that, and then the inspection process portion of that. Like, what do we do from the point that we need testing done, whether it be asbestos testing, lead testing, and how do we get the sale at that point? Probably the most important one right now. But we've also we've got a communication agreement that we created internally as to how people communicate, and then a communication externally agreement with our clients and our vendors as to how we want them to communicate. And that's it's there, but it's not quite there yet. I think those things will help us to stay on track and speed things along a lot faster.
All right. I got some rapid fire ones for you, right? One answer, quick, dirty. Feel free to give a little explanation as to why, but these are meant to be just boom, boom, boom. You ready? You want to flex? All right. Favorite dashboard metric?
The estimate approval lag.
Tell me why.
We need to improve it. It needs to be faster.
What's your goal?
I would say if we could get it on average, under 20 days, that would be great. Under
20 days. Well, how did you land on that number 20?
Well, there's been some talk in the industry, guys getting it done at a 10 or 12, and I'm thinking that that's just too steep for us. So, I could set it at 15, but again, I think 3 weeks is a pretty good time. You're beating 3 week turnaround time to get out there and check the job site and turn around. So we ended up on 20.
All right. What's a system that still feels like duct tape and hope within your business right now?
The approval process.
One book or resource that changed the game for you?
Well, Pivot was a huge resource. EOS was a huge resource. We went through that process for a couple of years, and through Pivot, we found The Advantage, and we also found Scaling Up, Vern Harnish books. So I like a lot of Patrick Lencioni's books. They've really helped a lot. The Ideal Team Player, The Advantage, Death by Meetings, Getting Naked, good stuff.
So you cited like the 3 common, entrepreneurial systems, right? Between Scaling Up, EOS, and then Lencioni's The Advantage. There's a lot of stuff that's pretty much the same, but seen through a different lens. If somebody was starting a business today, which one of the 3 would you recommend and why?
That's a good question. I would start with reading the books by Patrick Lencioni.
Okay.
See how they treat me. But I would quickly move into, I like the idea of having our peer group, our Pivot peer group. Yeah. I know it sounds cliche, but you've got a team that you can turn to, that they're real people, that they really care. It's not just, you build a relationship. I've hired plenty of consultants in the past. It's very different to have a facilitator involved with your peer group, keep you on track, because we can get off track real fast if it's just the 2 of us or 3 of us. You start talking about crazy things, and you're like, well, what were we even talking about originally? So having someone there that you trust to listen to you and give you feedback on what your goals are, and remind you of where you started and pull you out of the weeds once in a while, I think is really important. You can get lost in those books by yourself. You can get lost in the book Scaling Up. I mean, I have a printout somewhere sitting here that was, all the things that Scaling Up wants you to do. And I'm like, oh my gosh, do people really do that on their own? There's no way. It requires facilitation, and this is geared towards restoration. Restoration is quite the beast. So our pivot group is something that I'll stick with until I'm done with this career.
Awesome. What's one
And
thing
friends for life, I'd say.
Pivot for life? And people always ask, like, on the prospect side, one of the common questions is, why do people leave? And like we're a data company, right? So I know the answer. But anecdotally, most of the time, I'm like, it's because they sell their company. Like, that is the greatest threat we have. And I think the thing that I love about our model is that the knowledge you can learn is not limited by me as a facilitator or a coach or whatever the hell you want to call me, right? Like, it is limited by your peer group, which, you know what? You ask a question amongst 8 people who are really smart and brilliant, you get a variety of responses. And then you have this a la carte menu of how to proceed. As opposed to, if somebody asks me the question, I'm just going to share what worked for me. And that might not be the right thing for you. And so I think that's part of our secret sauce here at Pivot, is the collective knowledge, not the individual knowledge, right? Like, I'm one person with my flaws and my disposition, and certain things make me spicy and certain things don't, like, I just don't care about certain things. Don't come talk to me about payroll. I'm done. I don't want to ever have a conversation on payroll. But if you need help with your payroll, give me a call. I just don't like payroll for whatever the reason.
I grew a ton by just being around our group, learning a little bit more about myself and how I operate in a group. Again, being on my own since I was 19 in my company, which I started out at that point in time through till, what am I, 43 now? Would have been 41 when I started with Pivot, I believe.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was at the top, as I would consider, alone. And I don't know that I was necessarily, I was out in the community, I was talking with other business owners, but not at the depth at which we get in with Pivot. And the restoration is a lot. I think it's different with the emergency services added in, the cleaning aspect added in, dealing with insurance added in. The team that you get at Pivot, your peer group, really, really helps you feel better at the end of the day about what you're doing, where you're going. And had I found this 20 years ago, I would be much further ahead, much sooner, and wouldn't be sitting there wondering about what I'm doing, how I'm going to do it, staying up all night, thinking about, okay, we got this problem to solve tomorrow, waking up in your sleep and going, that's it. No, you've got your team and they'll give you your input. And I mean, it really speeds you along very fast. Maybe 10 times, you get to a decision 10 times faster with the meetings of those minds.
Yep. What do you think is one thing that most restorers misunderstand about profitability?
It's the profitability is really based off of the the depth of production, right? The fast turnaround of what needs to happen. It's not necessarily charging the most or doing it with the least amount of people. It's really about being able to understand what needs to be done on that project. Understanding that you've got a team trained well enough to go out and do it efficiently, and then adding in anything that's extra above and beyond the scope that you have there. So being able to dial in on those items would probably help, rather than being, the highest paid contractor in your area. Doesn't mean that you charge $85 an hour for each one individual team members. It means that maybe you're just getting a lot of work done very fast and efficiently.
Yeah. And so this is one of my favorite questions to ask. What's the one thing happening in our industry today that you can't stop thinking about?
How fast it's moving and the growth of it. I started out when it was a small industry and, we were the cool new thing and nobody was really into doing what we do. There was some really great guys who pioneered this industry. You've got like the Kurt Bolins and the Barry Costas of the world. And they there's a lot of other names you could throw in there, but ultimately, you think about how fast it's been moving for the past 2 to 3 years, maybe even 4 years. It's just changed. Everything has just become so There's a lot of competition out there with the consolidation that's going out there. You know, we get a person calling to buy our company every single day in an email. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I would say just the growth that we have in the industry right now, and pretty much how to be a part of it.
Yeah. You know, like I started in right around the same time as you, ironically, 60 miles southeast. And like, I remember printed MapQuest directions being stapled to my work orders, and work orders were a 3-part carbon. Like, there was no digital, man. Like, you couldn't, and then you had the county by county map books that you kept sit between the seats. So then that way you'd go to like A5 on the grid and be like, okay, the street's somewhere there. All right, now I know how to get where I'm going. It definitely has evolved considerably over the past, you know, gosh, it has been 25 years. It is a different world. Do you think it's a better world?
That's a tough question. Did I like
as I wax and wane
less competition?
over
Yeah,
my
I did.
books.
Yeah, I liked it when there's less competition. But you know, as we move forward, you know, innovation is the part that really I like. I like the part of, you know, getting better. You know, it's no fun to do the same thing. If I did the same thing every day, you know, I'd have to change my career. It's always something new. The peer group that we're involved with, I think that's one of the biggest things that they do is they innovate. They create new ideas and things. You know, we try to just solve some of the basic stuff too, but really there's a lot of talk about new things, new ideas, stuff that would actually work, but you can only do so many things. So out of that, that's the most, you know, interesting part to me is just the growth that's come of this. I mean, look at all the interest from all these private equity companies that are coming in and buying up these companies, the distributorships, the manufacturers, you know, the patents, you know, the consultants, everything. They're coming in and putting a lot of money in this industry because they see that in 3 or 4, maybe 5 years from now, if not now, this is a thing. This you know, this industry, people are going to need it. It's a must. And so I'm excited to see how that unfolds and how everyone works together, because I think it's only going to get better.
So when I was a technician, a lot of the guys I came up with, we took our WRT with Barry Costa. Like it was talked about amongst all of us technicians, like, yo, when you take your WRT, you got to go take it with Barry because he's the best. And this was right around the time that all the Chuck Norris jokes started coming out. You know, like, oh, you know, the rumor on the street is Chuck Norris's tears can cure cancer, but he never cries, you know, like, and so we had our own Barry Costa, Chuck Norris style jokes. Would you like to hear one?
Yes.
So it has been rumored that Barry Costa could have mitigated all of Katrina with nothing more than a portable and 3 temp employees. I ran into Barry at the Experience a couple of years ago and had the opportunity to be like, dude, can I tell you some of these jokes that we have about you? And he's like, oh yeah, he was so there for it. It was awesome. My last question for you. What did you learn about yourself as a leader in this process? Where do you think you've grown?
Yeah, I learned that I did not need to be as detailed as I am in order to make things happen. Hiring the smart people with the right attitude would take us a long ways. And so I really realized that I just needed to continue to surround myself with people who wanted to go to the same horizon as I do, people who had the same vision as I do and shared, you know, that vision. I learned that I got into writing process and procedure to the detail that I did because there were things that were not being done by the teammates that I had previously. And so by writing it and keeping it simple, it gives people the opportunity to find out a better way. They're the ones doing it. I call it the 12 out of 10 rule. You know, I'm going to give you I'm going to give you 10 out of 10 things I want you to do. Come back to me with 12 out of 10, like you're going to be better at this than I am because you're actually doing it. That's where I want you to be. And so I really realized that I did not need to break down every step of the way, every single thing that needed to be done. I just needed to give the core.
Yeah.
And then they figure out the rest.
That's awesome. I always feel like it's insincere to show up and ask you a bunch of questions without giving you the opportunity to do the same. What question do you have for me?
Anthony, what drives you every single day to jump in your meetings and give your all to your groups that you facilitate, including your pivot management meetings?
So I went through this like mental exercise when I exited my company and kind of had some time and space for the first time in my professional career. And one of the things I wanted to solve was the answer to that question, right? Like, what is my mission? Like, why? Like, I know I don't want to leave this industry, but I don't know why. Like in that moment in time, if you had asked me, I couldn't give you, it would have been, I'd have come up with something, but it would have smelled like bullshit. And so I landed on two things. While I do not know, I've got two young daughters, 4 and 8. I don't know what they're going to grow up to be, right? But when I look at the state of the industry today and have conversations with people who are older than me and their kids are getting into the workforce, there are a handful of exceptions, but universally, restorers older than me are not encouraging their children to get into the business. And I think that that's a shame. But on the other side, I completely understand why, because like the industry's not what it was for you and I, right? Like it was this wonderful, beautiful proving ground with no rules where success was predicated on how fast you could get things dry. And that was it. And it was fun and it was exciting. And so one of my personal missions is to be a steward of change within our industry. So then that way I'm in a position where when my daughters are of that age where they're considering what they want to do to make a living, like I feel happy and proud for them to be a part of the restoration industry. The other one, nothing rings a bell in my soul more than improving the lives of the people that produce product in the field. Technicians, right? The people out there working, sweating, climbing into attics, throwing on their poo suit, going into crawl spaces, like to have the opportunity to make their lives better in any way, shape, or form just rings true to my soul. Like nothing makes me smile more. And it took me a while to come to this realization, but probably the most effective use of my time to implement that change is working with individuals such as yourself. Like, how can I help you make it a better world for the technicians that work for your company? Those are the two things that I'll get up and fight for every single day on my worst day, without question. You'll get 100% of whatever I have because they're worth fighting for. They passed the eulogy test for me. Like, here lies Anthony Nelson, a compassionate father who bettered the industry for his daughters and fought to make the world a better place for the technicians in the field. Like, I hope that's on my headstone, man. I hope that's what it is. Nothing would sing higher praise to me. So that's why.
Yeah. That said, thank you for that. I think that I'll go back and change my answer of the process that I'm working on right now. That would probably be the biggest change to our company is the training ladder that you had shared with me. We have training ladders for a lot of office admin, accounting, marketing, some production, but usually it's project management items. You provided me with a ladder for a field tech to get all the way up to project manager status. And so I think that by implementing that and the bonus structure that goes along with that is that's our biggest goal right now, is to make sure we get that nailed down and provide them with comp and allow people to come in who know nothing in the industry to move all the way up to a well-deserved wage in this industry, the living wage in this industry that can take care and support a family.
like on level one was be able to cut straight lines in drywall and using your hey, here's 10 out of 10, give me 2 more. We tossed that to the production team. And it was funny, like 3 of the guys were like, no, we won't even let anybody cut drywall until they know how to detach a washing machine or detach the garbage disposal, right? Like that's level one. Then if you do that well, we might let you snap and cut lines. And I was like, and so in that ladder, you see all these detached, skills that folks have to learn. And that's where that came from. And so, yeah, your 12 out of 10 rule is brilliant, man, because we used to use that all the time.
Yeah. Try to be better at your job than I am, please.
Yeah.
We're going to give you the opportunity. We're going to train you, just, and we're rooting you on.
Yep.
I've got another question for you.
Yeah.
So you asked me, and it hits right at home with, being able to develop people and, essentially this industry. But what do you see is the difference between then and now for us, and what's coming?
Like through the lens of technology or through the lens of people
management?
Through the
lens of being in the restoration industry and wanting to be a part of the growth of it from what it was to what it is now. Where are we going from here? What's next for our industry and the young people that are coming into it? Why should they get into it?
Why should somebody, I'm not a big fan of college. Like I went and got a master's in business and I still don't know what I learned. Look at my brother who journeyed out as an electrician at 27. He's 30 now. And the lifestyle he gets to lead and the things he gets to do on a day-to-day and the smile on his face. There's nothing quite like making something every day with your hands. Like it'll make you smile. And so those individuals out there who are like, hey, why should I join the restoration industry? This is the one place where you get to work with your hands and produce a tangible product every day. And you get the opportunity to truly make a difference in people's lives every day. And you don't have to go to college. Like you don't have to go get a PhD and be a doctor to be meaningful. And so, and I also use that as a litmus test for whether or not you will survive in the restoration industry. Because if you don't have that passion to make a difference in people's lives every day, dude, this industry will chew you up so hard and spit you out. It's bad. It's bad.
Yeah. It's there's a lot of burnout. And it can come fast. And I see it on a regular basis. We've got young guys who come in, we build them up from not knowing a whole lot. Maybe they can breathe and swing a hammer to the point where, they can go out and perform water damage from start to finish on their own, or, clean contents or even clean a structure. But beyond that, when it starts getting into like writing an estimate, scoping out projects and getting, conditions approved by the insurance company, you end up with some blank stares and maybe some frustration, and at that point it's like, well, you can either advance and do this or continue doing what you're doing. And we need to be able to, I believe, advance our technicians in this industry to a point where they get a better living wage at the end of the day in order to keep them here, or some sort of production-based pay comp plan. And I think that's to get people interested in this industry and keep them here. That's what they need. They can get a job at McDonald's for $17 an hour in a lot of big cities right now. What makes them want to come crawl around in a basement or put a suit on and sweat in an attic? I mean, it's like all the things you said. You got to care and you're going to want to help somebody, and you learn a lot about yourself in this industry.
Yeah, Traverse City's 25. I was just up there. $25 an hour at McDonald's starting pay.
There you go, $25 an hour in Traverse City.
50 grand a year, man.
Wow.
That was my salary as a GM when I moved to Lansing.
Wow.
That's painful to say. Right on. Anything else before I wrap us down?
No, I just think you're a good steward to our peer group. Thanks for being here, and thanks for inviting me on. This has been a long roller coaster ride for me. I've had a lot of fun in a lot of years, and a number of years I haven't had any fun. A lot of sleepless nights, but in the end, it's provided me with a good life. And I advise that anybody who likes what they do and is struggling with answers to join a group and find out more about not only what you can do to help your team, but find out more about yourself and just strive to be your best. So thanks again, Anthony.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks for being real about what it takes to bounce back, sharing your pain from, going from a place that was a little dark and getting the wheels back on the bus and getting it moving again. If any of this resonated with you, don't hesitate to follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. We also have our systems assessment, which all of our Pivot clients take every 6 months, available for you to try. It's really simple. You fill it out. I'll follow up with you and we'll sit down and talk story about what the results of that system assessment were. And really what it does is it helps you figure out what's broken. And a lot of the times when you're running around on the day-to-day, you don't know what's broken. And if you're stuck, not sure, whatever the circumstance, don't ever hesitate to reach out to me. I'm an industry guy first. I kind of don't care. I love talking to restorers. If there's a problem you got and I feel like I can help you, I'm going to do that. Thanks again, Kelly. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Anthony.